Well, it's a blessing to see you all here this morning. And before we jump into the Word together, we have one announcement. Our midweek Bible study is on Wednesday evenings at 7 o'clock. We are currently in the book of Ecclesiastes. This Wednesday, we will be covering chapters 9 and 10. Ecclesiastes is an interesting book, and if you've never gone through it, I encourage you to join us. It's a great book to go through together. Book of Romans, chapter 1. We'll wrap up chapter 1 today. Paul, we're finished with the introduction. He began the letter with the introduction, and he now begins to get into the heart of his letter. Paul's passion is to preach the gospel of Christ to the lost. That's all he sees as his purpose. It goes beyond just telling people about Christ. His passion is to encourage people and to instruct people. What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to walk in the ways of the Lord? How do we do it? And this is the passion that he writes with. He's already shared with us that the gospel, he wants to share the gospel of Christ to the Romans because it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. So Paul believes, as do I, everyone can be saved by the power of God. But the interesting thing is not everybody wants to be saved. Not everybody believes they need to be saved. Nothing keeps people away from Christ more than their unwillingness to see or accept that they need Christ in their life. If we don't think we're sick, we don't go to the doctor. If somebody tells you, I went to the doctor yesterday, why? What's wrong? Because you don't just go. There's something wrong. And you go, well, I did my yearly, I always get phone calls from my doctor. I've shared with you guys, I don't brag about this. It's probably extremely foolish on my side. I very, very, very rarely go to doctors. My doctor has to hound me for months to do my yearly checkup. And then they just give up on me. It's just like, well, quit calling him. He ain't going to call you back. And that's not good. But I feel fine other than aches and pains of aging. And when I tell my doctor, yeah, it hurts here and it hurts here, and he kind of smiles and goes, yeah. That's all you got is yeah? And it's like, well, there's really nothing I can do about that. I can't stop the aging process. But when we don't feel sick, we don't feel the need to go to a doctor. If I don't think I have a problem in my life, I don't think I need to change. And if you've ever, you see a problem in somebody's life, or you see an issue in somebody's life, or you see a need in somebody's life, and you approach them on it, and they don't agree with you, it's just like, I don't need this. I don't need to go there or have this done or that done, because they just don't see a need for it. And so though the gospel is for everyone, and salvation is provided by the power of God for everyone, not everyone believes they need the healing of God or the salvation of Christ or Christ within their life. Again, Paul has stated that everyone can be saved, and he now begins to go through and show that everyone needs to be saved. We can sometimes pick out particular people and go, now that one needs to be saved. But Paul's opinion here is everyone needs to be saved. There is no exception. We all need to be saved. In fact, when he finishes and concludes this particular topic that he's going to be going through for a few chapters, in Romans 3:23, Paul says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." So he leaves no one out. And he's writing to the Romans and he's saying, I'm anxious and I'm wanting to come and to preach the gospel to you. God hasn't opened the doors yet at the time that he wrote this. God, as you know, we finished the book of Acts and he did make it to Rome. But at this point, God hasn't opened the doors, but he says, I want to come and I want to preach Christ. And I'm not ashamed of it, because I believe the gospel of Christ is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. So his passion is to go and to share. I find these next number of chapters very similar in explanation to when Jesus shared the parable of the prodigal son. Um, the father gave his son, he goes to his father, and you guys know that an inheritance is supposed to be after someone dies. But he goes to his father and he says, there's two sons, I want my part of the inheritance now. I don't want to wait for this dying thing. I want it now. And when you read the story and the father gives it to him, you tend to wonder, why would dad do that? I mean, he seems to be portraying, I don't want to follow the rules. I don't want to follow the process. I don't want to follow what everybody else does. I want to do my own thing here. I don't want to wait around. I want to take what's mine and go do what I want to do. And we can wonder, why would the father even give him his inheritance? Why wouldn't the father just say, well, if you want to go, go. But the inheritance isn't until I die. But the father gives it to him. And we all, when you read the story and you know that Jesus is telling the story, you pretty much know, I know where this is going to go. And it did go that direction. The young man wasted all of his goods and ended up feeding pigs for a job and even wanting to eat the food that the pigs were eating. That's how hungry he was. And then he decides, I'm just going to go home. I don't deserve to be my dad's son, but my dad treats his servants a lot better than this guy does. And so I'm just going to go and tell Dad, I'm sorry. I know I can't be your son. I blew that, but I just want to be your servant. I just want to work for you. I just want to serve and be one of your employees. And we see the father running after his son when his son comes back, and it says that he greets his son, and his son says, I know I don't deserve, I'm sorry. And the father picks him up, puts a robe on him, and celebrates, has a major party. They barbecue the fatted calf and have a great celebration for the return of his son. And you'll see that as we go through, and Paul's passion is to write this, he addresses God as the Father. And you'll see that he addresses things that we sometimes question. Jeanette and I had an opportunity with the family to go Friday night to a concert to David Crowder, who we totally love, and Toby Mac, who Jeanette totally loves. Toby Mac's son passed away a couple of years ago. And he said that he was his eldest son, and he says, and he was my problem child, suggesting to us that he probably wasn't walking as close to the Lord as Toby Mac would have preferred. I don't know the depth or the details or anything like that. But he then did a tribute to his son, and it was a very moving tribute. Very few people, if anybody, had dry eyes when he was finished as he shared things. And he shared something. He said, you know what, I'm so thankful because I know I'll see my son again. And how do I know that I'll see my son again? He said, because God allowed his son to die so that I could see my son again. And it was just like, wow, that was really awesome to hear that. But then he goes into the song, and towards the end of the song, it's him questioning, the day that I see my son, or when I get to see my son, these are things I'm going to ask him. So did the father run after you? Were his arms open? Did he greet you and hug you? And he was referring to the prodigal son, and when he went home and his father embraced him. And it was a very moving idea or thing that he shared with us, a tribute that he gave to his son. But I believe the point that we're going to be seeing as we go through the book of Romans, these next few chapters, is you don't have to get to that point. Okay, you don't have to get to where you're feeding pigs and you're actually considering eating the food of the pigs, or you don't have to go down the depth or the deepness of the darkness of the world in curiosity. We do at times go down there, but Paul's point, I believe, in addressing all this is you don't need to go that far. You can look at sins in our lives and needs within our lives, and you don't have to go that far, but the comfort is, if you do, he's still there. The Father is still willing to reach out and to pick us up and to put a royal robe that we do not deserve and have a celebration that we do not deserve because we've come home. We've come back to our God and we worship our God. And so this is where I believe the direction that Paul is writing to the Romans. I love going through the Bible book by book, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, because when these letters were penned, there was a whole thought. There was a whole thing. It wasn't like every, change of direction, change of direction, there was a point, there was a direction, there was a whole thing to it. I'm not against topical studies. You can pretty much take any verse out of the Bible and preach on that one verse and come up with all kinds of awesome things. But the book was written with a specific direction. And so we have verses and chapters to help us know where to go. Can you imagine the book of Romans with no chapters and no verses? And I just tell you, okay, we're going to start on this sentence that says, for in the righteousness of God. That, you guys find that sentence there in on page 2? It would be very difficult. So we have it broken down, and therefore we get this idea that it's just like in chunks. And I can't cover the whole book of Romans in one shot, so I give it to you guys in chunks. But there's a running thought, and there's a running purpose, and there's a focus that the book of Romans has. And right now, Paul has just introduced the fact that he says, I'm going to preach the gospel. I'll preach wherever I go because I believe, I'm not ashamed of it, because I believe it's the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes. And so this is his heart. This is why I'm writing to you guys. This is what I'm trying to share with you. I'm writing to you about salvation through the power of God. It is open to everyone. And so as he makes that statement, he then begins to get into the idea as far as, and listen, you might not agree with me, but we all need this gospel. We all need this salvation. And he begins to address who needs this salvation, who needs to be saved by God. Look at verse 18 of Romans chapter 1. He says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Father, as we open your word, it is our desire to grow and to learn and to understand and to be comforted, Father. Your word has been given to us so that we may know you. Father, your word has been given to us so that it may comfort us and we can rest in the truth and the ways and the promises of our God. Your word has been given to us so that we don't have misunderstandings of who you are and your passions and your desires for our lives. So, Father, as we open your word together, Father, may we be blessed and encouraged and instructed, Father. And we ask this in Jesus' name, amen. So, he shares with us here that the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness. God, and he says, and God reveals his wrath against us because people are suppressing the truth. They're putting the truth down. God is not neutral in regards to ungodliness and unrighteousness. There's no compromise with God. His only action with ungodliness and unrighteousness is his wrath. He just, if you're against it, if you're opposed to godliness, if you're opposed to righteousness, then God's actions against it are his wrath. Ungodliness refers to people's sins against God. Unrighteousness refers to people's sins against people. So that covers everything. If you're not God, then you're a people. Okay? And so that's all of us. And so those that are against righteousness and godliness, God's wrath is revealed. And those that are against it, it says that they suppress the truth. To suppress the truth means to ignore it or hold it down. Don't let it up. Don't let it be exposed. Don't let it be seen. Don't let it be heard. Keep it down. It's suppressing it. And so he says God's wrath is poured out against those that don't want the truth out, that don't want the truth revealed, that don't want to hear the truth. People who have decided to live for themselves rather than for God are those that suppress the truth. I've shared with you guys many times as far as before I came to Christ, though I grew up in the church, I didn't want to believe there was a God. Therefore, I suppressed the truth. And anybody that tried to share the truth with me, I was very belligerent with them. I was very rough on them. I was very rude to them. Well, I tried to shut it down. I don't want to hear it. We just try to shut it down. And so it says that God's wrath is revealed against that. And so anything that challenges somebody and their will and their ways and their desires, they don't want to hear it. And that's suppressing. He says here, he goes in, and they suppress the things of God, and they know about God. And you may be thinking, well, how can God show me his wrath for suppressing or ignoring the truth when I don't know the truth? I don't know what the truth is. Verse 19, Paul says that God has shown us the truth and has made it evident to all of us. He's basically saying, listen, God is real. A lot of people say, no, 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 no. But he says, listen, God is real, and he has shown everyone that he is real. God has revealed to everyone that he is real. And some people will go, no, he hasn't shown me. So-and-so had a vision, or so-and-so did this, or Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus. Okay, yeah, God revealed himself there, but God hasn't revealed that he is real or that there is a God to me, but he has. God, who in himself is invisible and unknowable, has revealed him because he's a spirit. He has made himself visible and knowable through what he has made. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. This is probably a horrible analogy, so bear with me. But years ago, there was this movie, Ghost, that was out, and the guy was killed, and then it showed that he was actually, I guess, in a spirit form. But his wife couldn't see him, couldn't hear him. So he was faced with the challenge of, how do I let her know things? How do I get through to her? How do I speak to her when she can't see me and she can't hear me? The whole movie was about how he used somebody who apparently could hear him, couldn't see him, but could hear him. But so why couldn't she see him? Why couldn't she hear him? Because the movie was suggesting he was a spirit. So how does God reveal himself to us that he's real? How does God show the world that he's real? Through the works that he's done, through the things that he's created. Look what Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1 says. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament, the heavens, shows his handiwork, his abilities of what he's capable of. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tabernacle for the sun. How do we know? It says the heavens declare the glory of God. The creation that we live in the midst of shouts, there is a creator. No one can explain the heavens, all of the stars, and the perfect placement of all of the planets, which have stayed steady and consistent for thousands of years that we've been around. Well, not we haven't been around, but people have been around. Nothing gets bumped out of orbit. Nothing gets bumped out of its process. Nothing changes. It's the same consistency for thousands of years that we're aware of, and could be beyond that. Well, they declare the glory of God's handiwork. There's no other explanation for it. No one can explain the creation of all the animals and mankind. Our human bodies. Who can explain them? They attempt to. Well, we came from goo and became a cell. And then that cell became 2 cells, and then 3, and then 12, and then 100, and then 1,000, and bam, here we are. Why aren't we continuing to evolve? Because we're done. Who decided we're done? The cells. Okay. Who can who can explain our eyes? Oh my gosh, you guys! I am so far from understanding medical terms and who we are, but just what little I've read, our eyes are amazing. Our lungs are amazing. Our nerve system, the location of our nerve system. God has planted our nervous system to where it's not out here. I have marks all over my arm. When I work, I don't even realize. I'll come and go, oh, look, tonight I cut myself because I know because I'm bleeding. What'd you do? I don't know. How'd you do it? I don't know. So can you imagine if my nerves were out here? I would know if I cut myself then because it would be, but the nerves are all hidden in joints and places where they're not, to be bumped. And who thought of that? Nobody knows and can explain, why does our heart keep beating? We know what happens when it stops. We know how to keep it or restart it, but what keeps it going? What keeps our heart? All of those beats, day in and day out, month after month, year after year, what keeps it going? We know that, blood's necessary and all that, oxygen's necessary, but we can't explain. Creation shows and reveals powers and abilities that we are not capable of. We can't understand these things. So God has shown all people the truth. There is a God who is higher than all. And there's no other explanation to creation. There's no other explanation. So Paul says, listen, God reveals himself to people that deny that and push that down and say, no, there is no God. No, we came from this or we came from that. They suppress the truth. They're not open to the truth. I don't want to hear the truth. He says, then God's wrath comes against that. People have chosen to ignore and to suppress the truth. And so Paul tells us how they have done this and continue to do this. Look at verse 21 of Romans 1. He says, because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. And they changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their heart, to dishonor their bodies amongst themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie. And they worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. He says, although people have been shown, and therefore people, we all know there is a God. They've chosen to deny and to ignore this truth and not glorify God and not be thankful for what God has created for us. In God's creation, you guys, he has revealed his power and love by giving us everything necessary for life. God in his creation didn't create us and said, good luck. He has given us everything necessary. He has created everything necessary for life. But people have chosen not to glorify him for his creation. People have chosen not to be thankful for his creation. It says instead they have chosen to be futile or pointless in their way of thinking. And their hearts have become dark to the truth. People believe that by rejecting God, they are wiser and smarter and better than those who believe the truth. People who don't believe in God look at somebody who believes in God as weak, incapable of life. See, I'm not like that. I'm strong. I don't need a crutch. I don't need a God in my life. I'm capable of myself. And those are futile thoughts because you got to come down to the reality as far as so you can breathe for yourself. You can keep your heart going for yourself. You can really do all this for yourself? Oh yeah, I don't need God. And they're futile. It's just like, huh. Well, then can you explain to me how you're going to keep your heart going? I'm going to eat healthy. That's how I'm going to keep my heart going. Okay, I don't want to be rude or crude or anything, but I know of people who have been so strict on their diets that it's changed their appearance and they didn't make it. Well, then they had it's a pointless, it's futile. We can't give life and we can't sustain life. Am I against healthy eating? Oh no, I'm not. I understand we should take care of these bodies that God has given us. We should not be abusive. We should not put things into our body that damage and hurt. And I'm absolute with all of that. But none of that healthy eating is what holds our breath. God holds our breath. He decides. He holds our breath. And so they believe that they're wiser than us. But here Paul says, but instead, that way of thinking, it doesn't make them wise. It makes them futile or pointless in their thoughts. It makes their hearts dark. It makes them, he says, makes them fools. Because the truth is right in front of them, and I don't want to see that. And they come up with their own ideas. To prove this, Paul says, they've changed the glory of the incorruptible, eternal God into corruptible, perishable things, like a man, or like birds, or like animals, or like creeping things. That's what they worship. These were the images of their gods. In all of their wisdom, in all of their knowledge that is beyond the believer in God, they worshiped creatures rather than the Creator. They bowed to golden cows. They made insects. They worship insects. They worship man. Things that are created, things that die, things that can't tell you how to create. And it says, so they've shown themselves. This is where their wisdom takes them. This is where their thoughts take them. Oh, I don't believe in an invisible God. I believe in a beetle. Not the Beatles, a beetle. I believe that there's the stars. The stars have decided my fate. I believe in images that I can carve myself. God forbid anybody to try to carve an image or suggest anything that looks like God, because none of us know what he looks like. So what would your image look like? Mm-hmm. It'd be like me telling you, hey, I want you guys all for homework. I want you all to go home, and next week I want you to bring me a picture that you drew of my neighbor. So what does my neighbor look like? You have no idea. Is my neighbor a guy or a girl? You have no idea. Is my neighbor old or young? You have no idea. So you would look at me and go, well, that's futile, Jim. We can't draw a picture of your neighbor because we don't know who your neighbor is or what they look like or who they are, nothing about them. Exactly. And so God says, I am spirit. You don't know. So you can't make images of me. So don't even try. But man, in their futile thought says, I know what he looks like. He looks like a cow. He looks like a beetle. He looks like a donkey or whatever. And you see, it's like, how do you come up with this? The futility of our minds. And you may be thinking that people today do not worship images of animals. That was back in these days. We don't do that. We are so much above the thoughts or the ideas of animals or worshiping animals. Check this out. Truth be told, evolution, which is taught in all of our schools, all of our universities, all of these unbelievably wise scientists teach this. Evolution begins with a cell that becomes an animal that becomes a human. So the supposed wisdom of our day worship creatures rather than the Creator. They worship a cell. And you and I came from a cell that became an animal, that became a person. But we don't worship animals, do we? See, we broke it down to a cell, so it doesn't look so bad. It just shows, do you see how futile our thoughts are? Do you see how futile our imaginations and opinions and thoughts can get if we are left to figure things out on our own? And this is what it says. It says, because they chose not to worship God, God gave them over and just said, well, then you figure it out. And this was their conclusion. Animals. Things that God created is what they turn to. God has given our society. Fine, you don't want to believe? Then what do you say? A cell. Where'd the cell come from? An explosion. And glue, where'd that come from? Somewhere. We can't take it all the way back. But this is what we come up with, you guys. And Paul is making this point as far as, do you see the reality that there has to be a God? There is no other explanation. Society today prides themselves in that we are so much smarter and intelligent and know so much more than 2,000 years ago when this book was written. And it's like, do we? Could we build a pyramid without cranes and forklifts and all? Could we pull that off? They did. So who's the smarter? We can't even really explain how exactly it was done. Well, we should be able to figure that out. That was done by man. So professing to be wise, people become fools. They exchange the truth of God for the lie, and they worship the creature rather than the Creator. We've got to be willing to just be honest and just say, okay, I can see where this can be a problem. I can see where this can fall apart. I can see that those are futile thoughts. When I'm left to myself, I futile thoughts. Because of this ungodliness and because of this unrighteousness, the Bible here in our text says the wrath of God is revealed. Look at verse 26. It says, for this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind, to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. When we think of God's wrath, we tend to think of fire and brimstone, thunder, shaking of the earth, which are all a part of God's wrath in the end times. But here in our text, we see a different kind of God's wrath. God's wrath here in our text is he gives us up. Go. He gives us up to uncleanness and to the lusts of our hearts and to vile passions. He gives us over to a debased mind. God basically says, if you choose to exchange the truth of God for the lie and worship the creature rather than the Creator, then I give you over to yourself and you can do what is right in your own eyes. You can go further and deeper into your own debased mind and vile passions. We read in Judges 21:25, that, referring to Israel, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And it was not a good time in Israel's history. And Israel did go further and deeper into their own debased minds and vile passions. I believe the worst thing God can do to us is lift his hand off of us and just say, go. Make your own decisions. Do your own thing. Think your own thoughts. Follow your own ways. I think that's one of the worst things God can do to us because we have a debased mind. This is where I can see the prodigal son's father telling him, then go. He knew exactly what was going to happen to his son. He knew his son had the wild eye and the adventurous desires and was going to go out and explore the world. And his father knew, you're going to blow all your money on people who say they're your friends until you run out of money. You're going to find yourself broke. You're going to find yourself destitute. I pray that you don't get killed. And I pray that when you get to the bottom, you look up to where I am and you come home. And it happened that way. But his father said, go. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to fight with you. And can you imagine if his father would have stood by the legalities and said, no, you can't have it until I die. No, you can't have it. I believe his son would have said, fine, and just left anyways, because obviously he didn't want to stay there. Obviously he didn't want to live under his dad's laws. Obviously he didn't want to live under his dad's hands and authority and control and teachings of his dad. He wanted to do his own thing, be his own man. And so his father said, then go. I can't convince you to stay. And if I try to make you to stay, it's going to be horrible. And this is what Paul is saying. So this is what God has done. He's turned his wrath in that he says, fine, I give you up. I know if I make you stay, I know if I make you worship me, I know if I make you believe in me, I know it's just going to be constant rebellion and fighting and disdain and everything else. So go. I give you up. You can follow your own passions and vile passions. You can follow the own lusts of your heart and go as deep as you want. I give you over to a debased mind. Oh, and folks, we have seen the depth of our debased minds in our world. And we see the ugly results of God giving us up to the lust of our hearts, giving us up to our vile passions, giving us up to our debased minds. The depravity of man is ever reaching into ugliness, darkness. What's the limit? How far will we go? Where will we stop? What's enough? There is no limit. If we are following our own thoughts, our own ways, there is no limit. There is no end other than destruction. If we follow our own feelings, if we follow our own thoughts, rather than the truth and the ways of the Lord, it will always lead to death. Always. I know that these are very controversial verses, and I believe that they're controversial because people want to follow their own way, their own feelings, their own thoughts, rather than the truth of God. All sin comes from our selfishness. I sometimes mention my grandsons. The only time they rebel against Jeanette and I is when we tell them, no, you can't have that, or no, you can't do that. Grandma and Grandpa told me no. Are you serious? And then they throw a fit, or they cry, or they argue back. Why? Why are they rebelling against what we just said? Because I told them no. You can't do that. You can't have that. But I want it, but you can't have it. I'm trying to protect you here. I know that fire looks really, really cool. You touch it, you burn. What's burn? I don't want you to find out. Well, I'm going to find out. Oh, that's burn. But that's our rebellion, you guys. How dare God tell me no? How dare God say what I'm thinking is wrong? How dare God say the way I live my life and have chosen to live my life isn't right? How dare God tell me the right way? Who is he? And so people rebel. We rebel against God. In this list of stuff, Paul says, nature itself teaches us, nature itself teaches us what is right and natural. In other words, nature shows us a male and a female are required to produce offspring. That's what nature teaches us. That's why men have to adopt children and women have to artificially use artificial insemination, there you go, to have a family. Because what they're doing, it's not natural. It can't happen. It's that naturally, and so Paul says, so look at nature, just what's natural, okay? And he says, and naturally you have to twist it, you have to change it, you have to add to it, you have to do something different because by nature, things can't be done the road you're going. Listen, can a woman form feelings for another woman? Yes. Can a man form feelings for another man? Yes. Can a man form feelings for another woman other than his wife? Yes. Can a woman form feelings for another man other than her husband? Yes. Can a person get mad enough to want to hurt or even kill another person? Yes. Can a person get desperate enough to steal? Yes. But to act upon any of these feelings is wrong. It's not right to the person we hurt or kill. It's not right to the person that we steal from. It's not right to the natural use of our bodies to go against nature. It's not right. Does it happen? Yes. We live in a fallen world. We have an enemy called the devil who is a liar. Jesus says he is the father of lies. He invented lies. And he tells you your feelings are right on. He tells you your feelings are justified. He says your feelings are natural. And Paul says they're not. I understand feelings. But if you and I follow our feelings rather than the truth of God, we'll fall apart. And we'll go down a road that you can't even imagine. This is why the Bible says we are not to kill. We are not to steal. We are not to commit adultery. We are not to be involved in sexual immorality of any kind. Why? Because it kills. It offends. It destroys. And so Paul is pointing out and just saying, listen, God says, fine, I give you over to your debased mind. I give you over to your vile passions. Where did it lead? He says, look at it. It led to women with women and men with men, and it goes deeper than that. None of this is God's ways. This is man's ways. This is personal opinions and personal thoughts, personal desires. It has nothing to do with God. He says, it's natural. It's natural. And I'm not trying to be funny or sarcastic or anything, but everybody knows if you're into breeding dogs, you know what it takes to breed dogs. You don't call your friend and say, listen, I've got a male and you have a male, let's get together and have some puppies. You know, I can't do that. Okay? Well, why? Because we naturally know there has to be a male and female involved here. And that's just nature. I don't care how bad you want. If you see a male dog, oh man, I'd like to have a pup from that one, but I got a male. Well, let's make it happen. You can't. Okay, but I want to, but you can't. So, well then how about, and then there we go. How can we pull it off and da-da-da. And it just, and those desires to make it happen is what puts us into the depth of the vileness of our thoughts and our sins. I got to have it. I got to make it work. I need it. It's who I am. And so we don't pursue truth. And this is Paul's point. He says God has revealed that he is God and he is above all. And people suppress the truth. Why? Because they don't want to follow his ways. They don't want to accept his truths. They want their way. They want their truth. They want their desires. They want their thoughts. They don't want his. His ways, his thoughts, folks, are completely and totally to protect us. Why are Jeanette and I protective of our grandsons? Because they don't know any better yet. Okay, there's things that I teach my 1 and 2-year-old grandchildren that I don't have to teach my 16-year-old or my 25-year-old. Why? Because they now know. But these two don't yet. They will. But for me, oh, isn't that cute? Let them go. Let them do it. You know what? They want to. They're having fun with that. What if they get hurt? Oh, they shouldn't get hurt. They will. My 2-year-old, I don't understand why, you guys. He loves running out into the street. Okay, and so whenever you get near a sidewalk, you have to hold his hand. Give me your hand. And he's like, he's fighting to get, no, I ain't letting you go. Okay, and car will hit you, it'll smash you, it'll hurt you. He has no idea what that means. To him, a hurt is he got a cut. That's a hurt. So a car's going to cut me? A little scratch? No, it's going to break bones. What in the world is broken bones? He don't know. So he's mad, he's angry, he's throwing a fit because I'm holding his hand. I won't let him loose, and I won't let him loose. I don't care if I have to drag him. He ain't getting loose because I'm protecting him. And God protects us, and he warns us. Don't go down that road. Why? I have friends who went down that road. They seem to be okay. They lie to you. They're not okay. I asked them, how you doing? They say, doing fine. Yeah, they're going to tell you, I messed up, man. Don't go down the road. No, everybody wants to look good. So Paul says, listen, God says then go with the prayers and the hope that you turn around. Now, we're not getting to the turnaround part yet, and I apologize to that in our text. But some of us may be sitting back and going, well, I'm not that bad, okay? I don't have those thoughts. I'm not that bad. Before we start thinking that, I don't have any of those issues within me. Let me read again, verses 28 to 32. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. Check this list out. Being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. Yeah, we can't escape this list, can we? None of us can. None of us can. Remember what Paul said back in verse 16. He said that the gospel of Christ is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. We look at this list, we might be able to blow past the first part and go, yeah, not me. But when we get into verse 29, we're there. All of us fit somewhere in here. And you can go through here and pick out some of the stuff that you're okay with. I'm not a murderer. Strife. Yeah, I did get in a strife with a friend once, just once. I've never deceived anybody in my life. I've been straightforward all the way. Well, okay, there were those 2 times, but it was for a good reason. I had to deceive them. Okay, they were, we can't escape this list, you guys. I'm not proud. Arguing with me if you're in the list proves you're proud. Inventor of evil things. That's definitely not me. Have you ever tried to figure out how to get your way? That's an inventor of evil things. So none of us can escape this list. This is why the gospel is so important, you guys. That's why Paul says, I'm anxious to get to Rome. I want to talk to you guys. I want to share truth with you guys. I want to share the gospel with you guys. All of us need to be saved by the power of God to salvation. No exceptions. All of us. Satan comes along and paints pictures and just says, well, at least you're not like that. Or at least you're not doing this. And he just glasses over the things we are doing and the things we are thinking and the way we are acting. And then he tells the person who we think is really bad, he tells them, you're really bad. You're too bad for God. It's like, absolutely not. It would have been such an amazing story if that prodigal son would have been on his journey halfway to the big city and decided, I don't trust me. I've got this passion to just go do some wild and crazy things and blow all my inheritance, and I'll probably end up broke. I'm going to go home and tell my dad I'm sorry. That would have been awesome. But he didn't. And the father would have embraced him and just, I'm so glad you changed your mind, son. Give me a hug. But he didn't do that. He went all the way. He went all the way to convince himself, I don't deserve to be my dad's son. But he hires strangers as servants. Prayerfully, he'll hire me as a servant. I'm just a stranger now. I'm no longer a son. But his father embraced him. So I don't care what road we've chosen. I don't care what path that we've gone down. I don't care what sins we've committed. I don't care the depth of how far we've gone. Our Father is waiting with open arms to embrace everybody. And I don't care if you've never accepted Christ or you have accepted Christ and you've gone back into the world. Doesn't matter. He's waiting with open arms. He will run. The answer to Toby Mack's question, I want to ask my son, did he run to you? Did he meet you? The answer is yes. Yes, he did. He embraced his son. And Toby's going to embrace him someday. So folks, all of us need to be saved. All of us need to be saved by the power of God to salvation. That's what Paul wants everybody in Rome to know. Because there's the possibility that the Christians in Rome were looking at, Rome was an extremely sinful, crazy, wild town. And perhaps some of those there in Rome who are now Christians were looking at those other Romans and going, how disgusting. You guys make me sick. You are so weak and pathetic. God's going to get you. Well, I pray that God gets them, but in a hugging sense, not in a judgment sense. And so he's writing to all of us. No, not to be proud, not to be a boaster, not to think that we're above anybody. All of us need to be saved by the power of God to salvation. Father, thank you for bringing us together this morning and allowing us to open your word. Thank you, Father, for having Paul write to this, that we could see depths and truths, that we could see your heart. God, that you love us and have revealed truths to us, and you come after us if we wander off. Yes, Father, you will not fight and hassle and pull and tug. If we choose to run off on our own, you'll let us go, but you're always keeping an eye on us. And you're always, as a prodigal son, looking down the road. Is he coming back? And Father, you're always running to us and embracing us and forgiving us and celebrating as we return to Christ and as we surrender to Christ. So Father, as we worship you now, Father, may all of our hearts just be focused upon you, Father. Focused upon your love for us, Lord. Focused upon your truth, Father. Lord, open our eyes to the gospel. Open our eyes and our hearts to the truth. Lead us to the point of surrender, Father. Lord, lead us to the point of saying, I'm done. I just want God's hand upon my life. I want God's ways in my life. I want to give up my futile thoughts, and I want to embrace the ways of God. So as we worship, Father, speak to hearts. Listen, if you're here this morning and you've never accepted Christ, or you've wandered away, and you hear that voice of God calling you and you see him reaching out to you, go to him, you guys. Run to him and surrender all. Come to him and just lay your life before him. the Bible says that if he is faithful to forgive us if we just admit, I messed up, I blew it. So as we worship, surrender to the Lord. Father, bless our offering as we give it unto you now as a part of our worship. Prepare our hearts for communion, Father, because this is your wisdom, the salvation through Christ. Your wisdom showed us that someone needed to pay the debt, and you said, my son will pay their debt. And he gave his life. He gave his life that we could have life. So as we worship, Father, meet us where we are. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's worship.